Welcome to the All 32 Pod. Mike Giardi here. Will Parkinson, my cohort, not here today, on assignment, if you will. Some would say that perhaps he is still licking his wounds from that brutal Jets loss, yet another brutal Jets loss in a season full of them, and really in the history of full of them. But we're not here to beat up on Will when he's not here. We do that when he's here as well. A reminder to you, this show brought to you by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network, and Game Time, best tickets, best prices to get you into any event that you want to see. And, of course, all kinds of stuff coming up as we get closer and closer to the playoffs. NBA, NHL in full swing as well. So plenty to spend your money on if you want to. Good Christmas gift. Just saying, good Christmas gift. Go to Game Time. They'll deliver. I wanted to start with what I thought was the game of the week going in, and then get to what was the game of the year a little bit later on. I'll start, of course, with what I thought was the biggest game, and that was the Chiefs hosting the Chargers on Sunday Night Football. Chiefs beat the Chargers 19-17. Once again, the Chiefs pull it off at the end of the game. It's the sixth game this season, the sixth game of their 12-1 start that has been decided on the final play of the game, which is just absolutely insanity. But that's how they're living, and that's how they're winning at this point as they improve to 12-1 with the 19-17 victory. Chiefs blew a 13-point lead. And it's interesting because we've talked a lot about on this podcast in particular the last year and a half how Kansas City, despite having Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce, have become a defensive-first football team. But I would say over the last 5 or 6 weeks, there have been some cracks in the defense, and they showed up in the second half of this game when that lead went away. The Chargers, Justin Herbert got going, really cooking it. Again, without Ladd McConkey, his best target, who was out for the game with the knee and the shoulder problem, elevating guys like Quentin Johnston, who was their first-round pick last year, who's still a hit-or-miss player, Joshua Palmer, Will Disley, their tight end, who's supposed to be more of a blocker. He gets hurt late in the first half. They've had no run game to speak of since J.K. Dobbins went down a few weeks ago. And again, that continued last night, averages 3.9 yards per carry. But Justin Herbert and this marriage with Harbaugh has really started to elevate his game. And I thought in the second half, if you dream of what Justin Herbert is, and he's obviously put up a very good resume so far, but doesn't have the postseason success, that's what you wanted to see from Justin Herbert. Precise, some big plays, both with his legs and, of course, with the arm, dealing with a knee, dealing with a bad ankle over the course of the game, and still staying in and putting the Chargers in a position to win the football game up 17-16. Chiefs get the ball back with 4:32 and don't surrender. Take it right down to the wire. Matthew Wright, their third place kicker this season because of injuries, clangs it off the upright. It goes in, the doink, and yet the victory. This is just how the Chiefs have played all year long. A lot of close games, and they've managed to pull it out in the end. Sometimes maybe it's sort of like if, you've follow me around from New England, the Patriots all those years would let the other team make mistakes or just find themselves in position late in games and then figure out a way to get it done, even when it wasn't their best game. Clearly, once again, not the Chiefs' best game on either side of the ball. And like I said, especially defensively, where they kind of collapsed in the second half, but they get it done. Patrick Mahomes, talk about elevating guys around him. Just like Herbert doesn't have a lot of guys to play with. Yeah, Mahomes might have the pedigree of someone like Kelce, but if you watch Kelce, he's just not the same player. I know he's had some good moments this year, but to me, Noah Gray, who's their backup tight end, has become sort of the explosive version of Kelce that Kelce used to be. Still doesn't have the same feel that Kelce did. Very few guys do, but he's been someone who's been important to them in the past game. They got Xavier Worthy involved late, a big catch from him, but again, continues to be more of a bit player rather than a starring role for their first rounder this season. Their skinny first rounder, which, by the way, I'm starting to get back to right where I was, where I'm still going to rule those guys out. I don't necessarily love the skinny fast guy overall, but that last drive, very efficient, effective. Mahomes apparently before the last play, consider maybe you want to run the ball. I said, I'll make something happen, Andy. And he gets them in better position, and they needed it because Wright damn near blew the field goal. I was kind of thinking to myself, who do we learn more about? And I think we now know what Kansas City is, and they've just sort of been reinforcing it all year long. They are incredibly mentally tough, and they're a team that you don't want to be in those one-score games, but there is a limit to what they can do offensively. That's the second time the Chargers have held them to under 20 points. Patrick Mahomes has been sacked now 13 times in the last 3 games. And sometimes Patrick is trying to make a little bit something happen, but also their tackles are a problem. They finally started DJ Humphries after signing him off the scrap heap with the torn ACL that caused him to miss most of the year. He goes down with a bad hamstring in the game, so they have to go back to Morris. Morris is on the field for that final drive, but he's nobody's idea of the answer, at least not the way he's played this season. So they've still got problems at tackle. They still have problems generating explosive plays. Isaiah Pacheco worked more into the action yesterday, but doesn't look like the same guy just yet. And you wouldn't expect. He broke his leg. It might take a little time. Might not even be till next year till he's that. And Kareem Hunt has sort of come back to earth and reminded us why he's kind of bounced around the league from a production standpoint over the last few years. So to me, we know what the Chiefs are. To me, the Chargers are showing you this is happening a year before it should. I think there's still a lot they're going to have to do with the roster, but that Minter has done such a nice job defensively, presenting problems for opposing teams. And while, they've benefited a little bit from their schedule being softer than maybe it gets credit for. And you've seen sort of recently some cracks against better offensive teams. That was back to sort of the way they played this year and made life difficult until the very end. So even Harbaugh can't quite influence the Chargers to beat the Chiefs. They've now lost 7 in a row against the Chiefs, but you have to like the trajectory that program is on. And we all expected when Harbaugh took over that he would sort of inject that life. It's what he's done everywhere he's gone, and he's doing it there with the Chargers, and they become a fascinating team to watch this offseason. But I'm not getting there just yet because I still think they're going to be a tough out in the postseason. You tell me the way Herbert's playing, if he's healthy and they can get McConkey back and they continue to play this way defensively, that they could cause somebody some serious problems in the postseason. And look, I wouldn't be, based on the way the AFC is, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if you told me, they're in the AFC Championship game. It's possible. Not saying it will happen. I'm just saying there's enough there to lead you to believe that they're going to be a team that's really hard to beat and has done a very good job generally this season of not beating themselves. For the Chiefs, when I talked about the defense and sort of struggling, I would just go back on that real quick. Yeah, they won their AFC West title again. But right now, second corner, you could argue even the third corner been a problem for them. No pass rush, what to speak of, really. Even Chris Jones is not having the kind of year that we're accustomed to Chris Jones having. So they've got to find it. Spagnuolo's done a great job still sort of piecing it together and still, again, enabled them to be a defense-first team, even if maybe their talent isn't playing to that or because of some of the injuries, they are not what we thought they were. Before we get to what I thought was the game of the year so far, absolutely phenomenal game, let's hear from Prize Picks, the best place to get you real money sports action. Over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. Just pick more or less on at least 2 players and up to 6 for a shot at 200 times your cash. That's right. It's been 100 times your cash now, 200 times your cash. We have a great offer for you at CLNS. You download the app today, use the code CLNS. You get $50 off instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even have to win. It's just about vibes, man. You can do it with basketball. You can do it with hockey, whatever. Do you think the next time the Bruins play, David Pastrnak is going to score more than a half goal? You go that route. If you think Anthony Edwards for the Minnesota Timberwolves, what's the number? 28 points, 28 and a half points? More? Less? Who's he playing? Are you vibing it? And then you just put those picks together, and it's fun. It's interesting. Gives you an opportunity. As always, Prize Picks runs your game. Let's go to the game of the year. An absolutely phenomenal football game. 2 offenses operating at the highest of levels, 2 quarterbacks operating at the highest of levels. The Rams beat the Bills 44-42. Big win for the Rams, who are now 7-6, just a game out of first place in the NFC West. And talk about dangerous. They're incredibly dangerous right now. As always with them, can their offensive pieces, Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, stay healthy, Kyron Williams? Because if they can, now that offensive line starting to gel after all the injuries they dealt with earlier in the year, and we know they've got a young improving defense that has posed a lot of problems for people, although not the Bills yesterday, although enough to get the victory. I mentioned Stafford just absolutely tearing apart the Bills' approach. And when Will and I sat here and talked about this game and previewed it at the end of last week, one of the things I said was, based on how the Bills had played the Chiefs earlier in the year, where they looked at the Chiefs and said, yeah, we're a big zone team, the Bills are, right? They don't like to play man. That's a Sean McDermott, now his new DC, Brian Babbage. Like, we're gonna sit back. Bobby Babbage, excuse me. We're gonna sit back. We're gonna play zone. We're gonna make you go 10, 12 plays, matriculate down the field. We think you're gonna make a mistake. By and large, that's been the case. But they looked at Kansas City and said, well, Worthy's a fast guy, but then you're putting out Juju Smith-Schuster. You're putting out Kelsey, who doesn't run like he used to. Justin Watson's a deep threat. Come on. DeAndre Hopkins, terrific player, doesn't run the way he did. And they said, we're going to play a lot more man. And they played a ton of man in that game. It was a bit of a wrench in Kansas City's plans because you played them all these years, and that's just how they play it. And then they go with a different approach, and it benefited. And they stayed in that game. Stayed in the game. They won the game, but they were very competitive defensively. Made life very difficult for Patrick Mahomes because of how they played and the looks that they showed him. So I figured going into this game, when it really runs through Nacua and it runs through Cooper Kupp to a lesser degree, because Nacua is now the better player. You know, Kupp with all the injuries over the years, it's just sort of slowing down a little bit. Still terrific player. Bill sat back in defense. I mean, sat back in the zone, and Stafford over 300 yards and just picked them apart. Nacua had a massive day, and even when he was played well, and you've probably seen the highlights by now, there were two catches where not only the body control to twist and make the catch, but then to get the feet in, like over the shoulder stuff. The kid, fifth round pick, should get everyone to reconsider how they evaluate that position, because he's not a burner. He knew how to play football at BYU. He did have the injury history. He's incredibly physical. He's got great hands. They give him the ball in the ground game at times. And again, he's not the fastest guy. You normally think jet sweep, you're giving it to the speedy guy. No, they give it to Nacua because he's a tough runner, smart runner, understands how to set up his blockers. Like, just, he's a phenomenal player. And, when he's been healthy this year, having a phenomenal season. So he and Stafford just went to work on the Bills. He had a couple touchdowns, including the wide receiver screen that turns out to be the game-winning touchdown, caught them in a zero blitz. Little move here, shakes one guy, he's into the end zone from 20 yards out. So the Rams are dangerous, and I think this, I'll speak for Will, I'm going to give him credit here. Will was on them being the winner of that division and making a deep run in the postseason. He might have even had him going at least NFC Championship game, maybe even the Super Bowl. Now that they're getting healthy, you can sort of see his vision there. It's a well-coached football team from Sean McVay. And yeah, they're incredibly dangerous. Meanwhile, for the Buffalo Bills, so much to get into here. I mentioned the zone defense and how that was exposed, and I was really surprised that they didn't adjust. I've criticized the Patriots for not adjusting. Sometimes these teams, they just get locked in. McDermott should know better than that, and he and Babbage should have had a better plan B, if you will, in that football game. Although, like I said, there were some blitzes. They just would dial them up at the absolute wrong time, or to the point where Stafford either read the tell, got the ball out to the right player, made a big play. But in this game, and Josh Allen becomes the first player in NFL history in the regular season to throw for 3 or more touchdowns. He had 3, and run for 3 touchdowns in a single game. Again, the first time in NFL history. On top of that, as you just saw, 6 touchdowns overall for the Bills in the game. They didn't turn the ball over once, and they still lost the football game. That has never happened in the history of the NFL. So think on that for a little bit. Josh Allen and the offense absolutely cooking. If you're into fantasy football, one of the biggest days in fantasy football history, like, he probably just made himself, if he wasn't already going to be the MVP, that probably cemented it in the loss that he will be the MVP this season, his first MVP award. But the Bills still managed to lose the game. And much like we talked about over the last week, when I said they're still not super talented on defense, the Bills, and if they were to be derailed this season at some point before the AFC Championship game, the defense would be what does them in. I guess it was a bit of a perfect storm because the Rams were clicking, and Stafford is obviously seeing everything, but there's just not enough talent on that side of the ball. And some of the talent that they do have is younger, and you're trying to sort of have them learn on the fly. And once again, their defense might be a year away from being what McDermott and Babbage envisioned it to be. But in this moment, they got picked apart. And it is, for me, if I'm a Bills fan, would be the thing that I'm worrying about. Could be the thing that ends my Super Bowl dreams a little bit earlier than I would have hoped, is that the defense just not enough pressure on the quarterback, a little light on the run. We've talked about how interior-wise, defensively, they're not a big team, and teams have been able to pound the ball. And then outside, they prefer to play zone. They don't match well in man. And this was an occasion where you should have tried to match in man, and he just didn't feel like they had the horses to do it. And they gave up 44 points. One other point about this, and this pops up. This would be the other reason, if I'm a Bills fan, for as much as I appreciate Sean McDermott's a really good coach. Like, they've built a great program. They're in the mix. They've been in the mix now for 4 years running. His game management sometimes in big moments has left people scratching their head. We obviously know the 13 seconds in the AFC playoffs a couple of years ago. This was not that, but it was not good. Late in the game, down 9. I believe I have the 9 points. On the goal line, he calls a quarterback sneak. The problem with calling the quarterback sneak is, if you don't get it, under 2 minutes to go, you need to call the timeout. They don't get it. They have to call the timeout. Tom Brady's best moment as a broadcaster, by the way, is he was like, what are you doing if you have to waste the timeout? Now you put yourself in a situation where you're dependent upon an onside kick to save your day, because you can't stop them on 3 plays, call timeouts, get the ball back, and then have a chance for a completion and a long field goal. No, this is now you have to go to a play that pretty much doesn't work. And it's designed not to work, right? You didn't deserve to get the onside kick. It shouldn't be just like a given. You're going to get that. So that happens, and he wastes the timeout. And then they do force the Rams to punt. In the closing seconds of the game, they don't return the ball. And so you're watching going, what in the hell just happened? What happened was they had 9 guys on the field. Think about that for a second. In the biggest moment of the game, the final moment of the game, a chance still. Again, the odds were long, but you want to either attempt the block or you want to run it back. And they had 9 players, not 10, not 12, 9 on the field. So they didn't even get a return. Game ends that way. McDermott said there's some communication issues on the sidelines. Look, when the 13 seconds thing happened, the special teams coach got run over and lost his job. When the defense has failed in big moments, Leslie Frazier, and they parted ways with Leslie. And Sean took over the defense last year and then promoted Babbage to be the DC this year. They've also changed offensive coordinators. So this is a team that's really close, that hasn't gotten over the hump. Had they won that 13 seconds game, there's no doubt in my mind they were going to win the Super Bowl. But they didn't. And so they don't have that on their resume. And, look, Sean's a great coach. If Sean were to be out there, every team that had an opening would line up, and some that didn't would line up, because of the kind of coach he is and the program builder that he is. But they got to wonder, like, are you going to do this? You're going to have a brain freeze again in January, or you get to February and that happens? It's something that I would be concerned about, because we've seen it a few times with Sean McDermott over the years, and it pains me to say it, because I really believe he's an outstanding coach, but it is what it is. The Bills have a game, by the way, against Detroit, so now they're 2 back of the Chiefs. So the chance for the 1 seed probably went by the wayside as well with that loss, which again is just as big. You're a good enough team to go into Kansas City and win, but you'd rather have them come to you. And now, Kansas City, maybe their run of good luck would have to end, and the Bills will have to beat someone like Detroit and have a couple tough games here to finish the season off to get that number 1 seed. But it feels like that is probably now an incredibly long shot, and that should also bother them. Let's hear from Game Time. You know how much I love to watch football live, but normally I get paid to go to these games. It's my job, right? Will's got his season tickets, so he's been set up for a long time. But if you want to go to other games, Will did it. He went to World Series games, saw the Yankees. I went to the Celtics opener when they raised the banner. Like the easiest thing to do, the best way to do it is to use Game Time, because unlike some of these other sites, it's just so much easier to operate, and the tickets, the way it's filtered, they call it Game Time Picks, takes out the fluff, shows you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I know I'm going to definitely hit another Celtics game probably soon. My son comes home from college, do that sort of thing, and we'll be looking for tickets, and the only place I'll be looking for is on Game Time. So just download the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app. Easy for me to say. Create an account. Use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the account. Download the app. For whatever reason, that's stuck in my head. Create the account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Oh, it's Game Time. And quickly, because they were so kind, sent me an incredible box of food. We were all busy. Like, we're all running around, especially the holiday season, or Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. Like, this is just the end of the year stuff. It's just, you're going nuts. So the days are shorter, but your to-do list, they got longer. So power through your busy days with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. From breakfast to dinner and anything in between, Factor has easy, nutritious options to keep you fueled and feeling your best. Whether you like routine or enjoy mixing things up, Factor has you covered with 35 different delicious meals every week and over 60 additional convenience options that you can add to your box, like keto cookies, pressed juices, smoothies. Had the pressed juice, the ginger one, perfect. Had the chicken piccata, fantastic. Cauliflower rice, which I'm not normally a fan of, delicious. Green beans, there were some green beans with almonds. Oh yeah. So don't let the shorter days slow you down. Stay energized with America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service. Again, Factor lets you do you. Customize your menu from 6 different preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meats, or simply eat well-balanced. Meals are chef-prepared, dietitian-approved. You're going to love not only how they taste, but how they support your goals. So head to factormeals.com/50Giardi. That's /50 Giardi, Giardi, and use code 50Giardi, again, Giardi, to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code 50Giardi at factormeals.com/50Giardi to get 50 off your first box plus free shipping while your subscription is active. Get 50% off. Like, what are you doing? I'm telling you. Came in handy this past week. Your boy's been busy even on the bye week. Final game that we talked about being a big game coming into this past weekend, was Seahawks at the Cardinals. Cardinals had lost 2 in a row since the bye and had choked away their lead in the NFC West. The Seahawks moved a game ahead heading into the weekend, but this game was in Arizona. You figured that Arizona would be the more desperate team. Instead, the Seahawks get it done 30-18. The Seahawks have now won 4 straight games, 8-5, a game ahead of the Rams in the division. Rams actually kind of control their own destiny because they do play, if they can win out here, because they do play Seattle in week 18, and that would shift the tide if they run the table. But right now, Seahawks in first place, and the job that Mike McDonald, their head coach, is doing. And if you go back to when we started this pod and we were doing season previews, I thought Seattle was going to make the playoffs. I thought he was the best offseason hire not named Harbaugh, because there's a clear vision of how he wants to play. And his defense has become the rage the last few years, and they're splintered off. I think there's 10 different teams that use some version of the Ravens Mike McDonald way here, if you will, in his tree. Miami's been using some of it. Tennessee, which his defense has been much better, has been using it. Miami's defense actually has been much better than the years past as well. And the thing about McDonald is, to me, he doesn't even have his guys just yet. But they took a big risk by the trade deadline. They traded for Ernest Jones, who started with the Rams, got traded before the season started because he wanted more money, to Tennessee. Tennessee realized this season's over. They punt on him. And Jones has done a phenomenal job for them in the middle of the defense. He's actually talking about how he communicates with McDonald. McDonald is the only head coach I've ever had that's in my ear, because he's the green dot guy. And it's like having another linebacker right next to you. 2 huge turnovers, back-to-back picks of Kyler Murray in that game, one by a linebacker, one by a defensive back, sort of changed the tenor of the game. And the Seahawks just sort of smothered the Cardinals in this football game. McDonald's got that going on. I'm just telling you, man. Like Leonard Williams is playing at a all-pro level. He's been phenomenal this year. Their secondary, Devin Witherspoon, who, along with Christian Gonzalez, came out of the draft last year, and we're like, if you had to you give me 5 guys, he'd be one of the 5 guys that I'd want on my football team if I was picking early. He's having a great year, and that defense is becoming, once again, maybe a little bit sooner than expected, is becoming a real foundation for that football team. And I think they're going to be fascinating with how they add to it in the offseason and continue to build his vision. The other thing about this game is Seattle actually ran the ball, which is they've struggled, averaging under 100 yards rushing per game this year, which really made no sense with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, who's pretty good backup running back. But Charbonnet in this one was the beast, 134 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, ripped off a run of 51 yards, big play as well. So it gets some explosive plays in the run game. And then Geno Smith, who we talked about this game coming in, we're like, well, what Geno are you going to get? Because the interceptions are part of Geno's game, but he also makes throws that, I don't know, 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the league actually attempt and complete. Like that's how good the arm talent is with Geno. And Geno was just calm, in control, no turnovers, 24 of 30, I believe, over 200 yards passing, and just like made a lot of the right decisions. His relationship now with Jackson Smith and Najigba has gone to the next level. Those 2 guys, that's clearly actually Jackson Smith and Najigba has become their best wide receiver and their go-to wide receiver. Great feel for the game. The kid out of Ohio State has really come into his own this season. So great combination there. They're just playing really good football. And I'd love to see them and the Rams in a winner-take-all in Week 18, but I don't think whatever happens with Seattle the rest of the way that it really should dampen sort of what they're building there in their first year without Pete Carroll. Mike McDonald is the real deal. Meanwhile, Arizona, hey, look, I haven't liked their defense all year. That hasn't changed. They had to blitz a ton as the year's gone on because they just can't create consistent pressure. Kyler has had a very good year. Sometimes puts a little bit too much on himself. And I would say the other thing about them is they drafted Marvin Harrison, and he's a terrific player. He's not put up the ridiculous numbers we thought he was going to. Malik Neighbors has got bigger numbers than the Giants, even though he's playing with a crap fest of quarterback. But Harrison isn't enough to turn around that room. Just like Neighbors, quite frankly, hasn't been enough to turn around the Giants room. There's another level that they need to get to in that wide receiver room. And I think, quite frankly, it needs to be more speed because Harrison can separate. He's obviously incredibly physical, but he's not a straight line burner. Feels like he might work in conjunction with someone who can stretch the field, work some of the underneath stuff, some of the crossing stuff to get the best out of him. And so they're just a team that's building under Monty Ossenfort, former Patriots and Titans executive who's now the GM there. And the roster has gotten better every year. And Jonathan Gannon looks like he knows what he's doing. Drew Petzig, I've talked about a lot here. Bobby Slowick's been the hot name as the OC. We've seen what's happened to Houston this year. And I think a fair amount of that falls on Slowick. Petzig just keeps getting them better. Again, working with less talent than the Texans have. If I'm a team who wants an offensive-minded head coach in this cycle, I'm calling him. And I'm bringing him in, and I'm picking his brain because he's showed me a lot in the 2 years that he's been the OC. He's been pretty creative and gotten a lot out of maybe not as much as you would think on the outside. So Seahawks get the job done, 8-5. Cards fall to 6-7. Big one for the Seahawks this weekend, Sunday Night Football against Green Bay. So that'll be fun. Cardinals will host the New England Patriots, the 3-10 Patriots. But Patriots, I think they have a couple games that they could potentially win here at the end of the season. Buffalo in Week 18 has their seating set up. McDermott's like to play the guys for a half, but not a full game. So you might have a weakened Bills team in Week 18, and I think this is a game coming off a bye. If Gerard Mayo, who believes he's got this thing going in the right direction, whether you agree with it or not, like this is a game you come out, you show us something after the bye. They were pretty beat up going into it, had some time to rest, and are playing a team that's really struggling. That's playoff hopes are, I wouldn't say completely extinguished, but they're pretty well snuffed out. Will's not here. We were going to include this game anyway, with the Miami Dolphins keep their playoff hopes alive with an overtime victory over the Jets, 32-26. But this is more about the Jets again than it is about the Dolphins. And Will's not here to talk about it. I will talk about it from my perspective. And I think that Garrett Wilson said it best after the game when he basically said, and I'm sort of paraphrasing, that they have a losing gene in New York. And when you look at their roster and the way they built their roster the last 2 years, but particularly the way their defense was trending and has been, I think, in the last 2 years, in my opinion, a top 5 defense, they're like, okay, they can even sustain something close to that level. It doesn't have to be top 5, but if they're top 10 and you get competent quarterback play, that they're a playoff team. And we obviously thought coming into the year they had a chance to win 13 games or so. Hasn't obviously gone that way at all. They have just 3 wins this season, which is as many as the Patriots do, as they both sit at the bottom of the AFC East. But they had this game won, or they should have had it won. It's 23-23. They drive down the field in the closing minutes of the game in field goal range on first down, under 2 minutes to play. Pitch to Isaiah Davis, loses 5 yards. Okay, that's not great. You're pushing yourself back for a field goal. You're inside the 30. Then Aaron Rodgers takes a sack, another minus 6 yards. Rodgers does complete a back shoulder throw to Devontae Adams that gets him back around the 25-yard line. Carlson kicks the field goal. Adams, by the way, forced out of bounds on the play, so the clock stopped, which is also a bit of a killer. So instead of running the clock down further, they kick off with 52 seconds left, up 26-23. Carlson's directive is to kick the ball out of the end zone. Carlson kicks it to the 1-yard line. Malik Washington, the explosive young rookie from Virginia, 6-rounder, another speed element that the Dolphins love to add, proceeds to run the kick back to the 45-yard line. So you're like, as soon as the kick didn't even get in the end zone, I'm like, it's just had all the makings, and then he busts this big return, 45 yards. So now you're already at midfield. Of course, they get into field goal range, kick the field goal, you go into overtime, and what do you expect? You get to overtime. The losing gene shows up. They lose the game. Touchdown pass to Geno Smith, who'd been relatively quiet for much of the day after having the last month or so being the most productive tight end in the National Football League. But it just, to me, credit to Miami, obviously, for pulling this thing out. And the kick return was a terrific comeback by Washington. Tua does what Tua does. Obviously his recognition and his release are – that's like the elite part of his game, the anticipation, the release, the accuracy. Like he puts it where he needs to put it. Doesn't have the hugest arm. Obviously not the biggest guy, not the greatest athlete. But if those are his superpowers, they all came into play late in the game and then again in overtime. But to me, once again, it's about the Jets. This is what happens with the Jets. And, they're hiring a new GM. They're going to hire a new head coach. But it just feels like, and we've talked about it here on the program from time to time, they don't have an identity. They're sort of rudderless. Woody Johnson obviously puts his fingers in the pie a little too often, which is his right to do as an owner. But I think the meddling owners generally get what they deserve. I mean, Jerry Jones is front and center, right? He's in the Hall of Fame. They haven't won a title in 30 years, 25 years, whatever it's been. And he thinks that he's the reason why they're competitive every year. When he doesn't make decisions, I think Woody's done some bad things for the football team. And if they're smart, and you remember they hired the 33rd team to be their sort of advisor for this process and hiring coach, general manager, they find someone who can establish a culture there because they don't have one. If Aaron Rodgers is it all revolves around him and he's your culture tone setter, you got a problem. And I think I talked about this with Will in the past, like, now you have to be careful with someone like Garrett Wilson or even Sauce Gardner, who's not played to the same level and did not play in yesterday's game because of the hamstring. that those guys, will they want to stick around, or will they be the types that say like, no, if not, unless you pay me every last dollar. And you say, well, like a lot of guys want the most money. Yeah, absolutely. And they should go for that. But I'm just saying, Garrett seems pretty frustrated with what's going on. If you read the full length of his comments yesterday, but also just even last year, like this is sort of building for him. He does not want to lose. Most guys don't, but it seems to really affect him. And I don't know, like, what's your plan? How are you going to make sure that Garrett is, who's one of the top 10 receivers in the league and is still really young in this league? Like, how do you make sure you keep him satisfied, but obviously not like building the whole program around him, but like he seems like a cornerstone piece because he cares about the success, the wins and losses. And Sauce has had this kind of different year, but obviously we know his talent is high, and you'd want to make sure that going forward, would he be someone that you want to be? Okay, well, we have our star wide receiver, we have our star corner, we got some other pieces, Quinn Williams on the inside. Like, we've got pieces that if we can just find a competent level quarterback, that we should be a playoff team if we have a good head coach. And I think getting a good head coach starts with someone who can build the program and create a culture there that they haven't had. And maybe Woody and sort of the circus that is around them makes that harder to do. But I don't know. We've talked about Mike Vrabel being from a fit in terms of what we're talking about here. He would be the perfect guy, and he would be the guy that I would circle if I were them. Like, I'm not looking for the offensive genius. I'm looking for someone who has won in the league before, is not going to take any BS, could handle the New York media, all the things that go into it. Like, I don't think Saleh was awesome with that. I don't think Brian Dable, who I'm a fan of as a coach and as a human being, I don't think he's done an awesome job with that either. So that's my words of wisdom for the New York Jets. Otherwise, you're going to keep sucking, and that's not where anybody wants to be. That's it. That's all I got. Will be back with me later in the week. We'll get into week 15 and some of the scenarios. Again, the NFC is far more wide open than there's certain spots in the NFC that are open. That NFC West continues to be crazy, and who knows what's going to happen at the bottom of the AFC. Quickly, shout out to Sam Darnold, 5 touchdown passes, delivering the goods. The 1 touchdown pass to Justin Jefferson when he ran around, and I know the defensive back was, I don't know what the hell happened to him. He fell down or got lost, and then he fell down again, but like, phenomenal play. He's having a great year. Someone locally suggested that he should be in the MVP conversation. No, that's a bit much, but he's really had a nice year, and he's going to make himself a lot of money in free agency, either through Minnesota, obviously drafted J.J. McCarthy, but he's hurt, or somewhere else this year. Wouldn't it be funny if Sam Darnold ends up being the quarterback in New York all over again? If I was Sam, I would not go back there, but he's done a great job. And Russell Wilson, second half, Pittsburgh put on a clinic. He's playing really good football. I just keep saying it. Like, I throw my hands up. I didn't think he was capable of doing this, but it's been the perfect marriage with some of the pieces that they have. They even got it done yesterday against, I know it's Cleveland, but Cleveland's been frisky. Got it done without George Pickens, their best receiver, as he was dealing with a hamstring. So he's also, speaking of making money, not that he needs it because he's getting paid by Denver for they owe him a lot. They vote him a lot of money, but this 1 year, $1.9 million veteran minimum contract that he signed with Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh wants to keep him around. That number is going to have to go up probably 10 times that, 15, depends on how greedy he wants to get. But a couple quarterbacks getting it done in big spots. All right, that's this edition for the All 32. Remember to like, subscribe, listen, rate, review, do the whole 9 yards. We appreciate you. Like I said, we'll be back with me at the end of the week. Peace.
It is caught! Touchdown! The New England Patriots select Drake May.